pattern, I do them so that you kind of make your own pattern up following my sorry, letting someone else in, following my instructions, which might feel a little bit scary at the moment, but honestly, don't worry, it's fine. Just take your time and you'll be good. Yeah, so you need your fabric. For this pair, I'm making a pair for my youngest daughter today. She's only 10 and she's quite diddy. So actually, less than 1/2 meter is fine for her size. For my size shorts, it was 1/2 meter. But obviously, if you wanted to make them longer, you'd need more than that. You also need your sewing machine, some fabric scissors, pins, or clips. If I've started using the clips a little bit more now, quite like them, but you can use pins, that's fine. Thread, something to mark your fabric with. I've got a fabric pencil here, a tape measure, and some elastic. I've got this thin, I think it's about, I'm not quite sure what cord it is. But it's about probably 1/2 centimeter in width. I'm just going to move you all, hang on a minute. There we go. Right. Okay, let's get cracking. So I'm going to share my screen and just walk you through the steps so that you can see what's going on. Where is my, hang on a moment. There we go. So if anybody has got any questions throughout, by the way, you can just pop them in the chat if you'd like to, because there's not many of you. I should be able to keep my eye on the chat quite easily, I think. Okay, Ash, can you see the Sew PJ Shorts document on the screen? Can you just give me a thumbs up?
Yeah,
perfect.
I can see.
Great. Okay, so this is like a an Excel type document. So I'll send this to everybody afterwards. So you'll see there are different tabs along the bottom. So this is kind of the introduction, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and step 5. So hopefully it's nice and straightforward for you to follow. And there's kind of diagrams and word instructions for each step of the way as well. And I've tried to make it, there are points where you need to measure whoever you're making pajama shorts for and pop the dimensions into the document, and it will work out everything for you. So wherever you need to do anything, I've put it in green, so look out for that as well. But it should become clear as you go along. So what I'll do is I'll send you a copy of this, and then if you could just download this and save it yourself onto your own computer or whatever you're using, and then it means that you've got this forever and you can then make a pair of shorts for anybody of any size at all. It's completely adaptable to any size. So I, as you can see, the ones I've used before were gingham. So I think cotton is really nice to work with because it's nice and cool and comfortable. So something that's relatively thin. Chambray works really, really well. I've used a double gauze before as well. Linen would be fine. Obviously just creases a bit more and it's usually a bit more kind of phrase a little bit more. Today I've got like a brushed cotton for Florrie because I thought that might be really nice and soft for her, and it's got kind of this cat design on it, which I think she'll really like. So that's a little bit thicker than anything I've used before, but I think will be all good. Because it's clothing, it's especially important that you pre-wash your fabric before you make anything, because it may shrink on washing, and you want it to shrink before you do your sewing rather than afterwards. Also need a safety pin. Oh yeah, I have got a safety pin. I forgot to tell you about that. But that's everything else that we went through. And then in terms of the amount of fabric that you need, you'll see that in a moment in step 1. So I'm going to go straight across to step 1 here. So can you see in green, so any kind of action step is in green. So step 1, please input your measurements below in the green boxes. So I've measured Florrie. She's absolutely minuscule. There's very small measurements in here, but around Florrie's waist is 59 centimeters. That's not kind of your true waist, unless you would like your pajama shorts to be actually right up on your true waist, kind of the thinnest point, or kind of where you're, where you put your hands on your hips, where you sort of where your tummy button is, really, at that height. I usually want them slightly more low slung than that. So you want the measurement that you put in this box to be where the kind of waist bit of where the waistband of your pajama shorts, where you'd like that to be. So pop that in there. And then in the next box down, you need to measure the hips and pop that measurement in here. And then the next measurement is the waist point. So again, it's the same, the waistband of where you want the pajama shorts to be, down to where the crotch would be on the pajama shorts. That goes in here. And then the final measurement is where the waistband of the pajama shorts would be, down to where you would like the bottom hem to be. So actually Florrie's asked for these ones to be quite long, a bit sort of Bermuda shorty. Whereas if it was my other daughter who's 14, she'd probably ask for them to be really short. So you can pop whatever you want the length to be in there. So as you pop these dimensions in here, what you would see is these dimensions down here in red would change. So if I was to change this 59 here to say 80, I'll do that in a moment, but just keep your eye on this red box here, 11B. Oh no, not that one. Oh, I'll keep doing it. I'll just change them all. There we go. So you see that one. So it changes. Oh, that must be referring to that. So it changes the dimension down here. So all of the maths is all done for you. As long as you've got the dimensions correct up here, it means that everything down here is going to be correct. So with Florrie's measurements popped in these green boxes up here at the top, it tells me that I need to cut 2 rectangles. So then that's green again. That's another action step for me. And it tells me that I need to cut 2 rectangles, each measuring 56.5 centimeters wide by 37 centimeters down. And if anybody wants to know how we got to those measurements, I've popped that down here as well, just so that you can see. But you don't need to know that. If you don't want to, you can just literally go by these measurements in here. So that's all of the prep that I've done already. Oh, actually, if you are making along, you will need to see that now. So, yeah, you might want to take a moment to copy that down. So Ash, you're making along, and Nicola, you're making along, aren't you? So if you do the hip measurement divided by 2 plus 21, and that gives you the width or length sort of thing of the rectangle. And then the height of the rectangle is going to be that waistband to the bottom hem measurement plus 11 centimeters. So that's all of the hems and seam allowances and things. So that is step 1. Do you want me to pop that into the chat just in case you are making along? Hang on a mo. That would be helpful, wouldn't it? Oh. Oops. It's that one. And then, oops. There we go. Oh, rectangle, you know what I mean. Okay, so there we go. So that's where we're up to. So I've already cut 2 rectangles. They're exactly the same size. So you want 2 rectangles that are the same as each other. Yeah, there we go. If you've got a pattern, so there's cats on this, I want it to be the right side up. So this A along here is the top of your rectangle. That's the way up that it's going to go. So that's step 1. Nice and easy. And actually that's probably one of the most trickiest bits actually. So then you've got your 2 rectangles, and it's time to cut a curve out of the rectangle for the crotch. So I'll just talk it through first of all, and then I will show you with my fabric here. So again, anything in green is kind of an action step for you. So when it's red up here, so don't input any measurements wherever there's red. You can only input measurements where it is green, like these ones here. So here we've got a couple of other measurements. And again, these ones are taken from the measurements that you've already put into that first box up here. So you only input the measurements one time, and then that will it will extract those measurements and do whatever it needs to do to them to tell you what to do with your sewing, irrespective of which step we're on. So don't need to do anything here. These dimensions will relate to exactly the measurements that you've popped on the first tab. So we've got C and we've got D down here. And those measurements, to tell you what those actual measurements are, you can look up here. So measurement C is going to be 21.75 centimeters, and measurement D is going to be 22 centimeters. So what we need to do is fold the fabric in half across the top and mark and measure C from the folded edge and D from the top open edge downwards. So I'm going to show you that now on my screen. Just double check nobody's asked any questions yet. Okay, that's fine, that's fine. We're all good. Okay, so here is my piece of fabric. So first of all, we need to fold the fabric in half. So I'm going to fold it in half, and I'm going to do both pieces of fabric at the same time. So I've got them laying on top of each other. So I've got two pieces of fabric here, just to save us a little bit of time. And also it means that they're going to match up absolutely perfectly as well. So I folded them in half like that. And the first measurement that we want to do is C from the folded edge up here, the top folded edge, and along towards the open edge. And in my case, C is 21.75 centimeters. So I'll get my tape measure. Actually, I might just pop a couple of pins in just to hold everything in place, to make sure, because it's brushed cotton, it doesn't slip around much at all, actually, but just to be on the safe side. Especially if you've got something a little bit more slippery. So 21.75 centimeters, I think it was. Yeah. So I'm measuring from the folded edge at 0 across towards the open edge, and I'm going to mark, oops, 21.75. That's going to be there. Do it a bit bigger so that you can see nice and clearly. There we go. And then my other measurement is down from the open, along the open edge, from the top downwards, and it needs to be whatever D is. In my case, D is 22 centimeters. I'll pop these into the chat in a minute as well for you. So from the top down, it's 22. Let me just do that, put them in the chat for you. So C is, sorry, I need to move this up. And then D is this. There we go. Okay, so I've measured those 2 points, and then if we go back to the instructions again, first of all, it's just asking you to fold fabric in half and actually mark those up. So that's what I've done. And then, oh, sorry, it's loads on my screen. Oops. And then the next step is to draw a straight line down and across with a little bit of a curve, joining up those 2 points that you've marked on your fabric. You can go most of the way down in a straight line, so you don't want the curve to start until you get probably like 2 or 3 centimeters up from where that point there is, depending on how large your pajama shorts are. Let me show you on this one. So I'm going to get I've actually got a ruler to do this bit because it's a little bit easier with a ruler. So, and what I'm going to do as well is I'll just mark another point further down at this point here, just to make sure that I'm doing a nice straight line in from the edge. So that's 7 centimeters in exactly from that outer edge. So I'm just going to do another 7 centimeters here, just to make sure that I'm doing a nice straight line. So join up those 2 lines, and I'll mark all the way down. And I'll make this one go across a little bit more. And then if you'd like to, if you've got something curved, like, I don't know, it could be, I'll just use this pin pot, you can pop that on where those 2 lines meet up with each other, and just use that as a curve if you'd like to, or if you're happy freestyling, you can do that. It's completely up to you. There we go. So hopefully you can see. There we go. I might do it with something a bit darker actually, so that you can see a bit more clearly. Here we go. I wouldn't normally use a biro, but just so that you can see it. There we go. Okay, so that's the open end from the top down. So then what we need to do is cut that piece of fabric out through all 4 layers, because I've got 2 on top of each other, and then they're folded in half. So then there's 4 pieces of fabric. There we go. And then if I take the pins out, yeah, we've got 2 pieces of fabric, which are this shape here. So what they are, so the way that, just to make it kind of so you can visualize what's going on. So this is going to be the front center seam. This is going to be the back center seam of one of the sides, like this. And this is going to be the other side over here. And then these bits here will form the gusset that goes underneath the crotch and then around the leg. So that's what we're working with. So let's go back over to the instructions again, and you will see that, here we go. So round off the curve and cut along the curved line through both or all 4 layers, if you put them both together. And then it says here that you can repeat steps 3 and 4 for the other rectangle, or you can do both at the same time once folded together like I did. So I'm making shorts, so mine look like this, but if you are making trousers, they're going to look a little bit more like this. So it's completely dependent on what size you're making. Let me try and see how. So Nicola is not making a long. Ash, looks like you still are. Are you making long? How are we doing?
Yeah, just try to cut out quickly.
Oh, okay. I'll talk slow. Well done. Well, it'd be lovely if you could do. Okay, so there we go. That's those steps. Have you got all the information you need, Ash? You can just give me a thumbs up if you want to. You don't need to unmute. Yeah, great. Okay. Okay, so I'll go to the next step, but I'll try and talk nice and slow because it's lovely that you're making along. We'd all like to see what you make. So step 3. Is everything making sense so far to everyone? Are we all good? Everyone happy? Perfect. Okay. So step 3. Honestly, this is such a nice thing to make because it is relatively straightforward. And what you end up with is really impressive. And I love that with sewing sometimes. It's something that's not too tricky and you end up with something that looks really quite complicated. It's always really impressive. And because it's quite a quick make as well, it means you can, you know, knock them up as gifts or whatever. And because you don't need much fabric as well. So next step, so again, it's green, so that's an action step for you to do. So you need to place the pieces of fabric together, right sides facing, and then we're going to machine stitch along the curves with a 1 centimeter seam allowance and clip the curves. Now, you can, if you'd like to, as long as your fabric's not too heavy, do a French seam. I think I've done a sample, yes. So with these gingham ones, I didn't do a French seam. And actually it's a really tight weave fabric. So all I did was, well, I didn't do anything. Maybe because they were sort of samples. But you could just pink the fabric with pinking shears, or you could do a zigzag if you'd like to stop it from fraying. But with this sample seam that I made, I did a French seam just to check how it worked on the curve. And actually it was completely fine. So you can do, I don't know if you can see, I'll show you close up when I'm not sharing the screen. You can do a French seam if you'd like to. And a French seam is a seam that you sew twice. The first time you do it with the wrong sides of the fabric facing, and the second time you do it with the right sides of fabric facing. I'll show you in a minute on this. So the first seam will be, because we've got a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance, it means that your first seam allowance would be 0.5 centimetre, and your second seam allowance would be 1 centimetre. So you've got the same amount of fabric. You're the same, sewing as ultimately the same distance in from the outer edge of the fabric, but what you've done is you have hidden all of those raw edges, so it's not going to fray, and it might be a little bit more comfortable, and actually it's going to be a stronger seam as well because you are sewing it twice. It's quite a good idea to do that, firstly for the comfort, but also because this is a pair of shorts, and you can, you know, especially at nighttime, if you're wriggling around, or you wearing them in the evening and you're sitting down and standing up, you might want to have a seam that's a little bit more like a bit stronger than one that's regular. So if you want to do a French seam, you can. I'll show you how to do that in a minute. This fabric is a little bit more heavyweight, so I'll see how I go. Might be okay. Anyway, so let's do that. So if I wasn't doing a French seam and I wanted to maybe zigzag first of all, I would zigzag just the curved edges for now, all of these curved edges, so down and across, and then place the fabric right sides together like this, and then pin and sew down here on both sides here and across here as well. But actually to do a French seam, the first, you don't need to do any zigzagging or anything like that. And the first hem you need to do is the wrong sides of the fabric facing. So it feels slightly alien, but it is the right thing to do. So let's do that. So I'm going to place the pieces of fabric on top of each other, should match up perfectly. And actually I'm going to use regular pins. So pin down here on this side, and then I'll flip across and do the same down the other edge. Oops. One, two, three. Okay, and then because it's a French seam and I'm going to be sewing it twice, I'm going to first of all sew with a 0.5 centimetre seam allowance. So I'm going to make sure my stitching is 0.5 centimetre in from the raw edge of the fabric. And the way that I do that is just make sure that I look for the 0.5 line on the plate underneath my presser foot. I'll show it to you in a minute, and then line up the raw edge of the fabric with that. I'm hoping you can see this clearly enough without putting my other camera in. Oh, no. Okay. So I've got a contrasting colour thread, so it should be nice and easy for you to see. So pop it under here and line it up with the 0.5 line on a straight stitch. Just get into position. and just follow the edge of the fabric down. So do a little bit of reverse at the top. Might be a little bit wonky because I'm not sitting very straight onto my machine, but you'll get the idea. This fabric's quite because it's brushed cotton as well, it's not quite as well behaved as regular cotton, but hey ho. Quick reverse at the end. And then I'll do the same on the other side. May as well do it properly. I might not do the next hems, the next one's French seams though, because it's going to take a bit longer, but you know how to do them now, so I can describe them going forward. Okay. And now, once we've done that first hem with the wrong sides facing, you might need to still clip your curves a little bit, unless it's a really, really fine fabric. So I'm just going to do a few notches, cut a few notches, like a few triangles out of the fabric around the curved area. And that's just to remove some of the bulk of the fabric so it sits nice and flat when we turn it round. Be easier to do this with embroidery scissors, but I don't have in hand. We go, just cut some triangles out around that curved section. Should we do it on the other side? And then you can turn the fabric inside out and have it so that it's right sides together. And what you would want to do really is press at this point so that you make sure that the fabric is properly turned out into that crease like that. Can you see? So it's really nice and flat. And then we're going to pin down here and then this time stitch 1 centimetre in from the edge. So we've still got in total 1.5 centimetres. It's just that we've kind of split it into 2. So that first ½ centimetre of fabric is going to be hidden in the hem. So if you've got time and you're watching back, I would definitely press this seam flat at this point and then pop your pins in with it nice and flat, ready for the second line of stitching on the same hem to make the French seam. Just try and finger press it so it's nice and neat. Actually, it's looking great. That's fine. We'll be okay. Fabrics, I think it's quite thin. It's quite working quite well. It's not as thick and unruly as I thought it might be. There we go. So I've put pins all the way down here. I'll just quickly do the same on the other side. And then we can stitch second line of stitching. Oops. Whilst I'm doing this, if there's anything, I'm at the moment working on the next set of workshops to put up on the website. So if there's anything that any of you would in particular like to learn how to make, just let me know. You can pop it in the comments if you like, because it's really nice to hear what sorts of things you want to make. And I'll make sure, you know, do my best to make sure that I put that on for you. Right, here we go. I've got pinned down this side and down this side. So I'm going to pop this underneath my machine again, and this time sew with a 1 centimetre seam allowance. Oh, there's another step that you can do with the French seam, actually, which I didn't mention. So before this step, before you've pinned, actually, you can just go around when at the same point as cutting out those notches, you can go around and you can trim all the way along that first hem a little bit, just to remove a little bit of the excess fabric. And then what that means is then when you open out your stitching, once you've finished the French seam, you are eliminating really the risk of any of the threads from the edge, the raw edge of the fabric showing through your hem. I'll try and show you. I might have, because I didn't trim it, I might have some. So then for once, I'd be pleased if I had that. Usually I'm not. There we go. Oops. Just do the other side, exactly the same. There we go. Let's see what I'm doing. Okay, so now if I open out the French seam, you'll see. Oh, I think we're good. Didn't need to do any trimming anyway, but you'll see. So this is what it looks like on the wrong side. So it's nice and neat. We don't have any raw edges anywhere. It's all kind of encapsulated in that hem. And then on the right side, obviously I'm not going to pattern match all of these cats. Firstly, because Florrie's only 10, she won't give 2 hoots. And secondly, because I don't have time or energy. It's fine. But as you can see, it's super neat on this side as well. So we've got what would happen if sometimes, I don't have any little bits poking out. Sometimes because you've done the French seam, you see a little few bits of strands of thread poking out from that seam. But I don't think we've got any this time, so that's good. No, all good on both sides. Okay, brill. So that's that step. Let me see. Okay, Ash is still busy sewing away. I'll keep going. So I'm going to share the screen again. We'll see where we're up to next. Okay, so we've done step 6. So placed the fabric pieces together, right sides facing, pinned together along the curved edges and machine stitched with a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance. We've done that, but with a French seam. So you can do it with or without a French seam. So next step is to open the fabric out, press the seams open and match up the inside leg seams to create 2 leg holes, and then pin right sides together and sew 1 continuous line with a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance. Sounds a bit fiddly, so let me show you what that actually looks like. So should I do another French seam? Do you know what? Yeah, let's, because it's quite a nice short piece of sewing with this project. So if I wasn't doing a French seam, what you would do with the fabric right side so right side's facing, so it's inside out, is so it'd be like this. And then you open it. So you've stitched your fabric like this. So I've done one hem down here, one hem down here. You put your hands in and you open out the fabric like that. And then you match up these two seams here like that. So again, it should match up perfectly. And then if you can imagine it, if I turn it around, what that's ultimately going to do is create one leg hole down here, inside there, and one leg hole down here, and then this would be the crotch bit underneath here. But the best way to do it is to have it so that the fabric is, first of all, like this, and literally just open it out and then match up those two seams like that. So if we weren't doing a French seam, this is what you'd do now. You would match up those two seams there. I would, if you have done French seams before, I'd press one way and one the other way like that, just to minimize bulk. If you have zigzagged, I would open out the seams flat and press them both flat, and that would minimize bulk as well. And then you just pin down here and stitch that hem with a 1.5 centimeter seam allowance. But let's do another French seam. I said I wouldn't, but I'm gonna, because it's not much sewing and I think it won't take very much longer. It will be much nicer, more comfortable and neater for Florrie's shorts. So this time, so same again, but with the right side out. Let's open the fabric up and again have those two seams matching up with each other, and I'm going to put it again so that one is facing one way. So I've got the actual seam bits lined up with each other, but the seam allowance from one is facing in one direction and from the other is facing in the other direction. And it should be, can you see that? The two edges of the fabric match up perfectly, and that should be the same on both sides. So let's pin that together. And then again, stitch down there with a 0.5 centimeter seam allowance if we're doing a French seam. Okay. Oops, there we go. It's going to be a little bit more bulky, but I think we'll be all right. I have done all of this with a French seam before, and it's been fine. It wouldn't work very well if you had much bulkier fabric. So I don't need to clip the curves this time, but let me just show you that step of trimming the hem. I'll show you on the other side because I've got pink thread on this side. So, oh golly, you can see how wonky my stitching is now because I'm not sitting straight to my machine. Literally, you can just trim the hem a little bit so that you're reducing the amount of fabric in the French seam. And then that will reduce the risk of any of those bits of fabric showing up from the edge of your seam. And then, because it's a French seam, you can turn it the other way around and find the same hem that we've just stitched. So that's where I put one seam allowance facing one direction and the other one facing the other direction. And then you'd want to press that same seam flat, but the other way round. And then pin and stitch it again, but this time with a 1 centimeter seam allowance. So exactly the same as what we just did down the front and back seams, but this time it's that crotch seam that we're working on. Oop. We're nearly there. We really are. There we go. I should trim those bits of thread really, but I'll do that in a minute. Oh, there we go. Just be a bit careful over this center bit because you've got lots of layers of fabric to go into your machine. Probably I'm speeding, I'm rushing a bit, but I think we're okay. There we go. Just trim all of these threads off. It's really good practice to trim your threads off as you go. It means that you'll end up with much neater sewing at the end. It's much easier than trying to trim them all off at the very end. Okay, so if I open out this hem now, hopefully it's going to start looking a bit like a pair of shorts. There we go. So, can you see? So we've got the front seam, front back seam, and then we've got 2 legs in here as well. So all that's left to do is that top hem and the 2 bottom hems for each leg as well. And it is great doing it with French seams because it means you've literally got this so nicely finished. You've got no, obviously it needs a press, but you've got no raw edges at all in there. It's going to be nice and comfortable to wear. So let's go back over to the instructions again. So step 4 is the waistband. This is really, really straightforward. Just turn the waistband over by 1 centimetre and then another 4 centimetres towards the wrong side of the pyjama shorts, and then pin and press the folds in place. And then we're going to machine stitch just 0.5 centimetre up from the bottom of that fold. So we're leaving a channel to thread the elastic through, and we're going to leave a gap so that there's space to put the elastic through that gap. So if you want to start, so it's, at the moment there's no difference between the front and the back of the shorts. I've allowed for so normally if you buy a pair of shorts from the shop, the back side of the gusset is slightly longer than the front side, but I've allowed for that in the pattern, so I've kind of balanced it out slightly. So at the moment there's no front and back, but you might decide that there's a front and back given if you've got a pattern on your fabric or something. So if there is, you can do the start and stop this line of stitching on the back so that you won't be able to see the join of stitching if it's a little bit more messy. So 1 then 4 centimetres is what we want to do. So, oh, here we go. I'm going to fold over. So if you want to double check in here, this say front center seam here, if I follow it down to where the gusset bit is down here, the seam allowance is going in that direction. So I just want to follow that up to the top and make sure that I keep that seam allowance facing in that direction so that it's not going to be twisted. So I'm going to fold it down once. Actually, I'm also just going to remove a tiny little bit of the bulk from the corner. So I'm going to fold it down by 1 centimetre and then by 4 centimetres, which I think is about that. Let's just double check. 3.5. Okay, and pop a pin in. And then if ever I'm doing anything like this with like a waistband or something like that, we'll do the same on the leg. I'll do it like once there, and then I'll do the same on like another, like at the back or at another kind of, you know, significant part, maybe on the side seam. So 1 centimetre and then 4 centimetres, and then you can kind of lift up the fabric and sort of stretch it so it falls really naturally. a little bit more, between the two pins, so you can make sure that everything is nice and straight. So we've got the other pin in here. So I'll show you what I mean. So I've put one pin in the back and one pin at the front. So then if I literally hold the fabric like this and kind of pull it, and I can see that is where I want the fold line to be at the top. Just pop in the 1 centimetre at the bottom. You can double check it, of course, with the measurements, with a tape measure, but it's just a quick way of kind of allowing the fabric to find, there we go, do it again, just kind of pull it in between the two pins, and it sits nice and flat there. Just keep popping pins in as you go. If you want to do a drawstring waist, you can. I think elastic's easier and probably a little bit more comfortable actually as well, but you can do a drawstring waist. What you would need to do really, there's a couple of ways. Let me show you actually, because there is a bit of a cheats way of doing it, which I can show you. And then the other way requires doing buttonholes, which you would do before you do this step. So I'll explain it to you at this point, and then you can make the call yourself. There we go. So if you wanted to do a drawstring, what you could do is exactly the same step as the what we're doing for the elastic, but at the front, on this front center seam, you could unpick a few stitches and then do a few more reinforcement stitches here. But what that gives you is a gap in the channel of the waistband, but at the front center, and then you can feed the drawstring through there all the way around and back out through there, and then that will act as a drawstring waist for you. It's kind of a cheats version. But the other way is you would do a couple of buttonholes, one on this side and one on this side. If you're brave enough to do that with your sewing machine, they're not too tricky, especially if you've got like a one-step buttonhole function on your machine. But you'd pin this now exactly as we have just done, and then you'd mark where you want those two buttonholes to go there, and they'd be vertical, and then unpin the fabric at the front, do the buttonholes, and then proceed as you were before, and then you'd have 2 points there to pop the drawstring through. But I think, especially for children's and for me, to be honest, elastic's just a little bit quicker and easier. So I've pinned that all the way around. I haven't been snipping my threads as I go, so you're going to have to excuse a few of those. So let's start here. Say this is the back edge, and I'm going to stitch this time. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up the left-hand side of my presser foot with that inner fold of the hem that we've just turned in. And that means that that's going to be a nice straight line all the way around. Actually, I might move the needle over a bit so it's slightly further over, closer to that hem. So do a few stitches. Oops. Reverse, and then we can make our way all the way around. I've had a lady make these before, I remember actually, a previous time that I've hosted this workshop, and she did them with a lovely, like light cotton. Move my mic so it's closer to me, not closer to my sewing machine. She did it in a really lovely light cotton and had them as trousers for her holiday, and they worked out so nicely. So they were like daytime kind of light linen-y cotton trousers for her to wear. So they don't have to be. pajama bottoms if you don't want them to be. I'd certainly use this as a children's kind of like daytime shorts pattern as well. Right, so I need to look out for where I started and then stop sewing about 6 centimeters before I get back to the starting point, just to leave myself enough space to thread the elastic through. There we go. Oops. So there we are. So it's stitched all the way around, just leaving a little bit of a gap in the sewing here. Let me just go back to the instructions so that you're not missing anything out. So we've machine stitched all the way around the waistband, 0.5 centimetre up from the bottom of the fold, leaving a 6 centimetre gap to leave a channel for the waistband. And then attach a safety pin to one end of the elastic and then thread it through till you get back to the start. Pin loosely and then try them on at that point, just to check that you've got the elastic correct if you're using elastic. And then if you're happy with the elastic, you can just sew the elastic ends together. So I usually do a zigzag over the two ends of the elastic. And the way that I do that is let me just check. What's Florrie's waist? 59. Let's just cut her elastic quickly. I'm not going to thread it through because I'll go and check on her, but that step's nice and easy for you to do. So I'm going to cut it at 59 plus about 5 or 6 centimeters for luck. But then when you sew the elastic together, you want to don't do it like that. Actually lap it over each other like that and do a few zigzags over it like that so that it's nice and flat when it's into your into the channel. So that's the waistband. So I'm not going to do that now. Like I say, I want to do that with Florrie in a minute, but that's pretty self-explanatory. And then the final step is to sew the hems. So again, I'll sew these ones here because it's shorts and it doesn't matter. It's not too, doesn't need to be too precise, but it might be more precise for you. So again, I try them on at this point, and just make sure that you've got them exactly the same length and that you're happy with the length of them. And then you want to fold them up. I'd suggest by 1 centimetre and then another 1 to 2 centimetres. Just make sure that you're happy with the length of them. When I've made the pattern, I've been reasonably generous. So you should certainly have enough to do a 1 centimetre, then a 2 centimetre hem. It's giving you a little bit of leeway just in case you decide you want them a little bit short, a little bit longer. And then you can stitch the hems in place with and I'd stitch just towards the top of that fold all the way around. So I'll quickly do one of those now, and then I can quickly talk about any embellishments. So I'll tell you how I made the bow on that gingham pair because they're quite sweet. So I'm going to fold these for Florrie. Again, you just want to make sure that with the hem, so at the moment it's going in this direction, so I want to keep it going in that direction down here. So I'm going to fold 1 and then 2 centimeters towards the wrong side of the fabric. And then pin. Do that again at this side. 1 and then 2 centimeters. Then I can just pull that like this. That should be enough. You can, if I was doing this not live, I would definitely press this hem at this point as well, just to make sure it's nice and flat and even. Oops. There we go. Right, over to the same machine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew just in from the top of that hem there. Oops. Move this out of the way, sorry, so you can see. Going off course. Just be careful when you go over the all these layers of fabric here. You might want to take it a little bit more slow. Done. So that's it. That's done. Done your shorts. I'll finish. Can you see? Yeah. So
Lovely.
gonna be like, oh, I just need to do the elastic, but I'll thread that through in a minute. So honestly, I just love them because they look harder than they are, I think. But don't tell anybody that. So with these ones here, so you can add pockets if you like to add pockets, but I'd just make them patch pockets. So I wouldn't bother with putting, because there's no side seam. The seams are at the front and the center front and the center back. So you've got no side seams to kind of insert pockets. So you just want to cut like a rectangle or a square or maybe a curved bottom piece of fabric out, turn the hems in on each side and then stitch along the top hem. If it's a fold it down and stitch on the top, and then place it on and then sew down the side and bottom hems if it's a curve or if it's a rectangle like that. And then you've got little patch pockets. That would be really cute. You could do one on one of the back sides or both back sides if you wanted to. That would be really nice. To do this little bow out of the fabric, all I did for that was took a strip of, I think it was even actually one of these gusset strips of fabric that we cut out at the very beginning. I cut it into a slightly narrower length and then folded it and pressed it in half, and then the edges into the center like that, and then stitched all the way down there to make a strip of the fabric. You can tuck the ends in as well, actually. And then I just tied that in a bow, and then I placed it onto the fabric and I did some machine stitches in the middle. So I just set the machine to zigzag. So it was probably about a 4 or 5 stitch width, but then 0 in the stitch length. So it was doing a zigzag on top of itself. So that's really good for like securing something in place. And I did some zigzags right in the center of the bow. And then what that does is it means the bow's not going to come undone, and it's sewed really nice and securely onto the center of the shorts. And it doesn't matter if you go through the elastic. You might, I haven't done, but that's probably just chance. But if I had done, it wouldn't have particularly mattered anyway, because you know, it can move freely around all of the rest of the channel. Oh, I've got a pin attached to me. In terms of doing a bow, let me show you, because there's a nice little trick there to help you. Oh, I'll do it with Florrie's piece of elastic. Okay, so to make a really nice, neat bow, take your length of, or you can use ribbon or lace, of course, if you wanted to. Take your length of ribbon or lace or fabric, and then make so fold it kind of at the center point, and then either side of the center point, make 2 kind of like bunny ears. I always think they're like bunny ears. And then you just want to do like a regular knot. So one over the other and then through the hole. So it's like a regular single knot. I'll just do it again. See? So 2 bunny ears, one over the other, and then do it through. And then if you kind of wiggle it around a little bit, you can get a really nice, neat bow, which is really sweet. And then the other thing that you could do, which I've not done today, but just to have done it in the past, is you could get some ribbon, or like it looks really nice with cotton lace, and sew a strip of it around the bottom of the legs as well. That looks really nice. I'm sure you've got lots of other creative ideas, but they're all the ones that spring to my mind. Yeah, that's it. That's how you make them. So let me just double check if there's any. Oh, Jane, patchwork quilt. Great. It is possible in a workshop, and I've done it before, and I will do it again. I think we did a patchwork cushion. So I'll put that one on. So look out for that one, Jane. I'll let you know when it's on. If there's anything else anybody would like to learn, pop it in the chat. And if anyone's got any questions, ask them now. You can unmute yourselves or you can pop them in the chat, and I can answer them live. And Ash, they do look a little bit pajama shortsy. Yes!
Yay!
Oh my gosh!
I need to hit one. I think I may have miscalculated my sizing as well. I feel like they're massive.
Oh, I don't know. Put your
By the time I
when
get
you've got your
elastic on it.
elastic in. When you've got your elastic in, because if I take the elastic out, look, they look massive.
Yeah,
With
so maybe
elastic,
yes,
but
the
then once you've
elastic.
got the elastic in, see what you think. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not because they're because
Drama.
they're the bottom. Yeah, you need to be able to. You don't want them to be tight because they need to be comfortable. You need to be kind of
Yeah.
move. So I have tried and tested the measurements so many times with lots of different sizes. So I'm pretty sure that it should be good. But if anybody makes them and you think that they're wildly off, then let me know, please. But honestly, I have practiced so many times and they should be okay. Well done. That's brilliant. Yes, so they are quite wide at the bottom, Jane. Not terribly, but they are quite wide. So what you can do is taper them. I've talked about that. I talked about in the last one. I didn't talk about it in this session, but if you do want to do trousers, pajama trousers, you can taper them slightly. So just from this point here, that point there, and obviously they'd be much, much longer. So from that point there down to where these two fabrics join at the bottom, you'd just do a very gradual, just grade it very slightly on a very slight diagonal. So it makes it slightly narrower at the bottom. Another person mentioned one time that you could do an elastic if you wanted to, make them a bit more like joggers and do a channel around the bottom and put elastic around the bottom as well if you wanted to. Might look quite cool, depends on what fabric it is, but that'd probably be quite comfortable as well. But yeah, the lady who made them for her holiday trousers, they were wide and floaty and looked really nice. So it's up to you. Right, I think we're all done. So I'll download the recording